Things that have happened since April in 2006. HBO have broadcast the entirety of the Game of Thrones TV show. Drake has put out his entire recorded output. Tinder has gone from being a flammable kindling to an app all about... And, something that hasn't happened in that time is new music from Tool. Until now, my name is Beez from WhatCulture, and I'm here to discuss whether Tool's new album, Fear Inoculum, has been worth the 13-year wait. Yes, indeed, it has been 13 whole years since Tool last recorded a studio album and put it out there for the world to hear. Fear Inoculum is finally here, and I guess the big question after 13 years of waiting is, can it ever truly live up to the hype? And that would depend upon your own expectations. I think that after 13 years of waiting and an entire generation of people being kind of told about this band, oh my god, they're incredible, they're amazing, all of the plaudits that come with people who talk about Tool, but not being able to check it out on streaming services, with this being the first album to come out since they've been put on streaming services, I'm not sure this is a good first step if you have never tried with Tool before. The example that I can give is like Led Zeppelin 3 is bloody amazing when you're into Led Zeppelin, but you wouldn't hand someone the kind of more folky, off-kilter album that they've got as their introduction to Led Zeppelin. You would want to give them something that's a bit more rollicking, and part of what has made this 13-year wait so interesting is that Tool are a band that are shrouded in mystique, which is why this album is a bit like Chinese Democracy as well. Axl Rose was never talking about what that Guns N' Roses album was going to sound like, and the members of Tool are very aloof when it comes to talking about their music. In fact, bass player Justin Chancellor recently spoke to Kerrang! Magazine and said that talking about music was like dancing about architecture. But I digress. I feel... going into this album, it depends on what you want from Tool, because if you like the more riff-orientated metal side of Tool, this is probably not a record for you, because this is a very mellow, spacious album that is going to require multiple listens. Trust me, I've lived with it for a week. I've been listening to it every moment of every waking day that I've had, and I still feel like I'm only just burrowing into the surface of this. But what I can tell you is that this album is really going to take time to sink in. I think if you are looking for those moments where Tool just come crashing into a song and smash you over the head a la Stinkfist or Bottom or Parabola, or if you are looking for big vocal hooks like the way that The Pot opens from 10,000 Days, this is not an album for that. In fact, the title track that was released before this album, which is now the longest song to ever land on the Billboard Top 100, Fear Inoculum itself is a really good precursor of what to expect from this album, because it is 10 minutes, and I read plenty of comments from people that were saying, what, nothing happens? Yeah, plenty happens, but you just have to delve into it. And something that I think is really great about this album and about Tool as a band is they're not a band obsessed with retreading the past or recapturing the glories, sounds of yesteryear. This is a band in their 50s, and this is an album made by a Tool in their 50s, and this is a band that have always written for themselves. So again, I don't think that it's that surprising that there's no real vicarious moment on this album. You may also have read that there isn't much Maynard James Keenan on this album, and I would say that yes, he is more sparsely used on this album. If you have watched Maynard on Joe Rogan, when he's spoken about the process of writing music with Tool, he likes to be given the full musical canvas and then bring his layer of vocals to that musical canvas. And because Tool are a band that have been open about in the press run up to this album coming out, they have scrapped entire albums worth of material before we've got to Fear Inoculum. So when you are trying to insert yourself into these big, broad musical canvases, there is a less is more approach from Maynard that works a treat. He may be on this record less, but the work that he does on this album is frankly phenomenal. Again, on Fear Inoculum, the expel, exhale moment, that is only used, I think it's twice in the whole song, but it's so catchy and memorable. The opening to Culling Voices on this has a real kind of traditional old English folk style feel to it, but the vocal lines are amazing. The warrior struggling to remain consequential on Invincible is phenomenal. Again, his use of repetition, the weapon out and belly in hook on that particular song as well is just huge. This is even Numa, the second song on it, there's these big one life, one breath vocal hooks. He's more sparse on the record, but he's no less engaging. He also spits venom on the centerpiece of this album, but I'll get to that a little bit later on. As you have heard, if you've listened to this record, Danny Carey, the drummer, is on phenomenal form, even by his standards. I've said this before, he is basically, you know, the octopus that drums in Aquaman. If you made that squiddy if you made that into a human person, then you would have Danny Carey from Tool, because he is wonderful on this album. The way he hangs in the background while still doing really impressive stuff all the way over Descending. But when it comes time to really build that track, and when these kind of mesmerising guitar solos from Adam Jones kick in, the tension that Carey brings with the drumming is just fire all over this album, and particularly on that song. In fact, he's a 5-minute drum solo might sound like an absolute nightmare to anyone with fully functioning ears, but Chocolate Chip Trip on this really works as a brilliant interlude. I would recommend maybe cutting out the interlude songs. So on the physical CD version, the 3 instrumentals that aren't Chocolate Chip Trip on the record, and I feel that leads to it being a much more cohesive listening experience. But this album's major talking point is going to be its final song. It is called Tempest, except with a 7 instead of a T at the beginning of it, and I've seen written that this is Adam Jones's finest work to date, and I think that's part of the fact that the way the media works now, if something isn't the best thing ever, then it's not worth its time, and you know, it is. Like, it's not the best thing that Adam Jones has ever done, but it is wonderful. It is a 15-minute long song that never gets stuck in itself, is never self-indulgent. It is the most metal thing on this record, and its main riff, straight out of the Jimmy Page, Matt Bellamy style, rollicking, rolling, riffing style. It is brilliant. Maynard James Keenan, the way that he rolls his vocal cadence with those riffs on the first verse, and he spits this "we know better" all over this song, and there's something so great about when the music is punctuating and Maynard James Keenan is jabbing his words along with it in the way that A Tempest must be just that towards the end of the song. That is just so undeniably tall and just wonderful. And this is it. This album, after 13 years, it doesn't have to be the best thing ever. You have not been sat for this entire 13 years waiting for this Tool record like you're waiting for the groceries to turn up that evening, right? Like, other things have been happening in your life. There is no need to make it so that if this album isn't the best album of this decade, then it's not worth jack. Actually, it's a really great record, really deserves your time, really needs your time to get the most out of it. I'll hold my hands up, and on first listen was just like, this is like an open world that I'm going to have to live in for a while to really get into. There aren't moments that are instant, and the second you hear it, they're instant classics. But what this album is another phenomenal album from Tool. This is 5 albums into their career. All 5 of them are world class, and as I say, they have an identity in 2019 and a new, unique sound and a new record for the first time in 13 years. What do you think about Fear Inoculum? Let me know in the comments section below. I'm Beez from WhatCulture, and this was an entire video about whether or not Tool's Fear Inoculum was worth 13 years of waiting. I will see you next time.